Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another weekly episode of Garden Hour. Thank you to many of you who are joining us on a hot evening. So hopefully you're settled down with a glass of iced tea and in a cool place, wrapped up with your gardening tasks for the day. My name is Kristine Lang, and I'm an assistant professor and SDSU Extension Consumer Horticulture Specialist. And I'm based here in Brookings, but work statewide. And I know I'm a regular on Garden Hour, but it's been a few weeks since I've seen all of you. So I'm happy to be here and be hosting. And we have two Garden Hour returnees, special guests who have both made one other Garden Hour appearance previously. And so I'm really excited to welcome Gabi and Maddie to tonight's presentation. And so joining us this evening is Dr. Madalyn Shires. She's an assistant professor and extension plant pathology specialist. And Maddie, what are you going to be sharing with us tonight?
Tonight, I'm going to be talking about some common horticultural problems and diseases, focusing mostly on vegetable crops, but these do apply to other crops and trees and woody ornamentals even. So we'll be kind of covering, I think, 5 different problems.
Awesome. And my understanding is some of those were inspired by recent events, aka a field day yesterday. And also joining us for her second Garden Hour appearance is Gabi Bulwark. And Gabi is a master's graduate student in the Department of Natural Resource Management, working with Dr. Laura Perkins. And Gabi, what are you going to be sharing tonight?
I will be talking about the Native Plant Initiative, what we do and what we can do for you.
Awesome. Well, I know many of our gardeners will be excited to hear all about that. And I've had some inspiration based on some recent family time. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about gardening with kids, which no surprise there, it's kind of thematic with me. I want to remind everyone that anytime you have a question for myself or Gabi or Maddie, please feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A. I'll be paying attention to that. And as each person wraps up, I'll be sending those questions their way. If you run into any technical difficulties, don't be afraid to drop that question in there too. We have Evan Berg helping us behind the scenes tonight, and so he'll be happy to assist you. And without further ado, Maddie, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, and I look forward to hearing about some plant problems as well as some plant solutions.
Okay, putting my screen shared. All right. I am going to be talking again tonight about some different plant problems and plant diseases. Kristine is right. A lot of these were inspired by the High Tunnel Field Day yesterday. If you attended, it was a really, really fun experience. So without any further ado, now that I've got my computer all set up, we will get started. All right, so tonight I'm going to be talking about some horticultural diseases. Some of the ones I'll be talking about are blossom end rot, powdery mildew, downy mildew, gray mold, and tomato spotted wilt virus. Some of these you may not see until later in the season, but transmission of these diseases such as tomato spotted wilt virus are occurring right now. So I wanted to kind of bring them to your attention so that you could think about management strategies. The first one we're going to talk about is blossom end rot. What is blossom end rot? So this is the one that is not actually a plant disease caused by a plant pathogen, but it's actually a physiological disorder. It's caused by a lack of calcium available for plant uptake, whether there's not enough calcium in the soil or some of the other soil nutrients such as nitrogen is preventing calcium from being used. Or plant damage can also prevent the calcium from being utilized. What plants are affected? Mostly it's focused on tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and squash. So this is just a couple of examples of blossom end rot, both here on tomatoes and on peppers. You can see that the symptoms of it are very similar. The ends of the fruit start showing these rotting symptoms. they turn black and necrotic. They kind of become sunken, and the fruit is just rotting. So this can be kind of distressing to see, but it isn't a pathogen. So if you are able to get your calcium amounts managed, it should be something that you can take care of. And on that train of thought, what are some ways to prevent blossom end rot? Watering in the proper amounts. Too much water or too little water can cause plant damage and prevent nutrient uptake from the soil, including calcium. Fertilizers, there's a little bit of research that shows that fertilizers could be related to blossom end rot developing. So one of the things that was recommended was using a nitrate fertilizer if you were putting out nitrogen, and it was heavily emphasized to not over apply fertilizers, as that can cause plant damage and also tie calcium up in the soil and prevent it from being utilized. There are also plant varieties that are more tolerant of varying calcium levels, and so they are actually said to be less likely to cause or to show symptoms of blossom end rot. The next one we're going to move to is powdery mildew, and this is a fungal pathogen. So it is a plant disease that grows white mycelia on leaf surfaces. Most people have probably seen powdery mildew on some sort of plant. It's extremely common. It can occur at any time of the year, but especially in warm weather under 90 degrees with moderate to high humidity. And here, at least in I can't talk, at least here in eastern South Dakota, we have been having environment conditions that are conducive to this disease. So it's very possible that you might see a little bit of powdery mildew on some of your young plants that are outside in your garden. And most plants have varieties that are susceptible to infection by powdery mildew. And when I say most plants, that is everything from garden plants and herbs all the way to trees. This is a pretty widespread pathogen. So here are some examples of powdery mildew, and this is the most typical symptom that you will see, and it's that white growth that's happening on the leaf. It kind of looks like a white spider web that is growing out on the leaf. You may also see white spots or some yellowing. This example here is a tomato stem that has powdery mildew, and you can kind of see that the leaves are becoming dead, and the leaves and the leaflets are all dying and dying back toward the stem. And like I said, many different types of plants get powdery mildew. This is on roses, and so again, you can see the white powdery growth that's happening on the leaves. You can see that here on this bloom stem. So there are several different ways to manage powdery mildew. The best way to manage it is using resistant varieties. Another great management strategy is to remove infected leaves to prevent the spread of the disease, and also pruning plants to allow for better aeration. I know you may not always be able to prune your plants, but if you can help increase the air that is moving around that plant, it will help prevent powdery mildew from developing. Avoid watering your foliage, so getting that water splash onto the leaves, as that encourages fungal growth. And applications of fungicides can help treat in extremely early infections. If it's too advanced, it's going to be a waste of money and effort, because it would just be easier to remove the parts of the plant that are symptomatic, and then probably do more of a preventative application of fungicide. Moving into another mildew type of disease is downy mildew. This is a plant pathogen that is called an oomycete, or water mold, as it's more commonly known of. And water molds are similar to a fungus, but their life cycle requires water for movement during reproduction. The weather conditions that cause downy mildew is lots of water and moisture that remain on leaves for an extended time period, and extended periods of high humidity. So again, Here in eastern South Dakota, we are having weather conditions that could be conducive for downy mildew development if it's present in the environment. What types of plants are affected? Most vegetables, herbs, and ornamental plants can be infected by this pathogen and show symptoms. This is the most common and classic symptom of downy mildew, so I've only included the one. This is on a cucumber. And the biggest thing that you look for in downy mildew is these angular yellow spots that occur on the leaf. And you can kind of see these here. And that is what you'll see on the tops of the leaves. And I have a picture in a minute that'll show the bottoms. But if you start seeing these scattered yellow angular spots on leaf surfaces, leading to the whole leaf dying, then there's a chance that you might have powdery mildew or downy mildew. I'm sorry. Speaking of what I just did, because these two diseases require similar weather conditions and leaf wetness, I thought I would pull a picture that actually showed the difference in the two because they are different diseases. So the white growth that you can see here on this leaf is the powdery mildew, and this darker black growth is actually the downy mildew. So this is when you turn over symptomatic leaves. This is what you would see. And if you have co-infections, so both of the mildews occurring on a plant, this is very commonly what you'll see. Ways to manage downy mildew. Again, there are some resistant varieties available. The biggest way is to avoid watering on the plant foliage or water standing on the plant foliage for an extended period of time. One of the things that's always been recommended is to try to water your plants in the morning or the later afternoon to allow time for those leaves to dry if you do get them wet. The best way to prevent that leaf wetness would be through drip irrigation or something like that, but we don't all have access to that. So changing your watering timing could help. Again, like powdery mildew, good aeration through pruning and plant spacing can help reduce downy mildew spread. And removal of asymptomatic plants will also help reduce the disease load. There aren't any effective chemical applications for downy mildew. So most strategies are cultural, such as changing your watering styles. The next one I'm going to go on is gray mold. There we go. This is again another fungal disease, and it is caused by the fungal genus Botrytis. So you may have heard of gray mold, you may have heard of Botrytis. It's all the same thing. What causes Botrytis to develop are cooler temperatures in 60 to 75 degree and high humidity. The plants that are affected, it can be anything in your landscape, essentially. Botrytis really enjoys causing problems on any type of plant that blooms. So it can be a problem if it's not managed. So here are some examples of gray mold or Botrytis, however you refer to it, on tomatoes and a strawberry. There are leaf symptoms, and it's kind of these round circular lesions that kind of work their way out. Fruit that gets infected with gray mold will kind of start with round circular lesions that gradually grow larger and kind of form almost this bullseye type of appearance. Botrytis can infect stems and leaves. So it's very common that you'll start seeing the plant tissue just kind of shrivel and die. It will probably be growing a little bit of a fungal grayish, greenish colored fungus on it. And it will probably be the ends of the plant that have had water sitting on them for a while. And then Botrytis, this is it on strawberries. And you can see this grayish, greenish mold that's growing on the strawberry. And you can tell that it kind of started up here and is working its way down. How to manage Botrytis. I did read on several things that it is less likely to occur here in the northern part of the country in field-grown plants, but it can be a problem in greenhouses. Good plant spacing helps prevent the spread, and it improves that aeration around the plants. Again, reduce the time that leaves and fruit remain wet. Removal of infected plants and fruits is your best way to manage it, because as you could probably think about that strawberry, there's tons and tons of fungal spores sitting there on that strawberry waiting to be spread. Another thing that is recommended is to avoid plant injury, as that allows the fungus an opportunity to cause infection. The last one I'm going to talk about is tomato spotted wilt virus. This is one that you will not be seeing at this point in time, but it is being spread right now. So it's important to keep it in mind, especially if you're in the western side of the state. We've been having a lot of cases of it, and I do know that some cropped up on the eastern side of the state as well. So tomato spotted wilt virus, as the name suggests, it is a viral disease. This virus is spread through thrip feeding on infected plants, and then that thrip later feeding on a healthy plant. So it's spreading that virus. Plants that are affected is mostly tomatoes. And again, if you are in the western side of South Dakota, this is one to really keep in mind if you're growing tomatoes. And we will have an example. So these pictures are actually of tomatoes in South Dakota. We have a great fact sheet that's out there. It was published late last year by Dr. Rhoda Burrows. Great examples. This is an example of leaf symptoms, and you can see these spots that kind of give it that spotted wilt name. So the spots and the wilt on the leaves. The fruit is some of the more interesting ones to look at, because again, you kind of have those rings that form almost a bullseye on the fruit. And this is on unripe fruit here. Management for tomato spotted wilt virus. Again, resistant varieties, very, very useful. Attempt to reduce your thrip numbers through insecticide applications. There's no way to prevent all thrips. All of us in the plant pathology world just say that thrips appear out of thin air. So you're not going to prevent all the thrips, but putting out some periodic insecticide applications that are targeted toward thrips could help reduce the numbers. Removal of all infected plants and materials, as this is a viral disease. There are no chemical treatments for infected plants, and those thrips, again, they just need to feed on those the symptomatic plants, and then they have that virus and we'll move it to a new healthy plant. So the best management strategy is to remove all infected plants. So that is all of my plant disease talk that I have. So I think Kristine mentioned it, but I cannot remember. So I am also the director of the South Dakota Plant Diagnostic Clinic. We are a service-based clinic, service and fee-based clinic that provide plant disease diagnostic issues and solutions. The reason I'm kind of pointing this out is we just moved 2 weeks ago to a much, much larger clinic space. We've been able to purchase new equipment, and so we're actually going to be able to increase the types of diagnostics that we're able to perform. If you've ever been to our old clinic, it kind of was a little bit of a cave, and it's not that way anymore. So we're very, very excited, and we very much look forward to being in that clinic and getting it up running here in the next week or two. And then here's some of my resources for all of my information. And with that, I'll go back to the plant disease clinic, because I realized I did not put a contact slide, but my email is there.
Awesome. And Maddie, if people have samples, or they're having problems and they want to submit photos, can they send them to that email, or is there a good plant diagnostic clinic email? Or how should gardeners who have, like, I think I'm having a disease issue or a plant mystery to solve, how can they get in touch with you in the clinic? Or your preferred method? What are the steps?
If you have symptoms, the best email to send to is our plant clinic email. And I did not get that put up here because I just kind of threw the slide together right before we started. But that one is sdsu.pdc@sdstate.edu. And you can look that up if you Google South Dakota Plant Diagnostic Clinic. It should be the first thing. Our web page should be the first one that comes up, and you can get all of our contact information from there. If you do have a specific issue, or you just want to talk about plant diseases in general, you're more than welcome to email me personally, and I will do what I can to help you out or give you information that you're looking for.
Awesome. Well, Maddie, I do have kind of a weird, like a fun or dorky question about powdery mildew. So the one that looks like kind of the white deposits on leaves. I've had before where people are really worried about powdery mildew.
Mhm.
And I've noticed situations where it rubs off really easy and they're watering with like municipal water. So, how do you tell the difference between I've just watered a lot on my leaves and it's calcium deposits versus powdery mildew? Any tips or tricks?
Um, Probably the best way is going to be actually flip those leaves over and look for that white growth on the underside. And it's going to look more webby-ish than what it's going to look more like droplets from your calcium or your salt in your water, because I know that can also leave white residues. But if you flip that leaf over and you're seeing obvious white stringy growth happening on the underside of the leaf, it's a good chance you've probably got powdery mildew going on.
Awesome. Well, and along that theme of lookalikes, my student was just asking me, they saw what they thought was webbing on their transplants, and they were worried that it was spider mites in our greenhouse. The reason I didn't panic in this case is it was in our germination greenhouse where it's really super wet. And so I think we were looking at some mold, but it is a reminder along that theme of thrips, as if we stick with this hot, dry weather, spider mites on our plants could be an issue as well. I've already seen some photos from my sister-in-law in Iowa that her phlox was being decimated by spider mites. So stay tuned, watch the SDSU Extension newsletter for more articles from our entomology team. Always watch the tree pest alert for more weekly updates from John Ball regarding what pests are active and what in the world to do about it. So, and be on the lookout for lookalikes as well. We did have a question that came in about pill bugs and what to do regarding pill bugs that are in a mulched garden and kind of, roaming around the plants and creating some issues. Again, always don't hesitate to follow up with the garden hotline or the entomology team. But a key takeaway for pill bugs is they really love those damp, organic mulched environments. So you might really love your mulch and not want to tear it out. And I'm not advocating that you should tear it out. But consider, just like Maddie suggested, using drip irrigation or thinking, more intentionally about your water placement. Is that a garden spot that's maybe being overhead watered or watered with a sprinkler? Like, how could you keep more of that mulch dry for longer and just get the water on the plants and see if that helps with the pill bug problem? And I did drop a website link with some more suggestions in the Q&A. And then as we're transitioning to our next speaker, we do have a question about a new lawn that was seeded this spring, and it's looking pretty good. There are quite a few broadleaf weeds, potentially kochia coming in as well. What are my options? With a new seeding, keeping that grass well watered and healthy, mowing high so you're not taking off too much right away and stressing it out is going to be super important. I'm seeing lawns here in Brookings that are already starting to go dormant and showing signs of, I had someone say that my June lawn looks like July lawn. And so I think first and foremost, keeping that lawn watered and healthy is going to be really important. Keeping it mowed to mow down those weeds, and that grass is going to start tillering. That's going to help. You would probably have some broadleaf herbicide options, although off the top of my head, I don't feel comfortable saying use XYZ product. So things I would encourage you to look out for is, make sure it's labels always the law, follow all label recommendations, but make sure it's labeled for broadleaf weeds. Be careful what you're spraying it around for gardens. And as it gets really, really hot, I don't care what herbicide you're using, pay attention to the temperature outside, because on these days where we're getting over 90 degrees, a lot of those herbicides say, do not use this product over those temperatures, because it may not actually be as effective, or it could be way more detrimental to other garden plants that are near that lawn. So that's my 2 cents on managing the lawn problems. And again, don't be afraid to follow up with us with the garden hotline, and we can dig into that one deeper as well. But I think this is maybe a good PSA in general to keep an eye on your plants, keep things well watered. I have seen some gardens that folks were frustrated with, the plants aren't looking good or things aren't germinating. That top layer of soil where we're waiting for seeds to germinate, if you're someone who was still seeding things in the garden, we need to keep that wet, and it's drying down faster than we think in many cases. So sometimes I tend to err on the side of overwatering, but this year, with how hot and dry conditions have been already, and I know we've had some rainfall events depending on where you are in the state, but keeping those young transplants and seedlings well watered for your vegetable garden and your bedding plants until they can root in. Once plants start rooting in, then I'm way less worried about that top inch or two of soil. I care way more about what's going on, 3 to 6 inches where those roots are starting to reach in. So you might be watering fairly frequently right now. And as we maybe are getting faced with watering restrictions, I've heard of a few coming from both municipal and rural water districts. Know that those plants are going to start to reach deeper into that soil, and those deep, infrequent waterings, instead of just putting on a little bit every day, deep and infrequent. So every 4 days, lining up with water restrictions. So nobody panic. Is good for your lawns. It's good for many of your plants. And again, kind of keeping a watering cycle that's fairly regular, as Madalyn Shires just talked about, is really good for helping prevent blossom end rot. So, all right. Gabi, I want to make sure you have plenty of time to talk about the Native Plant Initiative. So I'm gonna welcome you back. And again, Gabi's you're in your second year of master's research, kind of nearing the end. So you've had time to study a lot of things and do a lot of things and work on a really cool team with lots of neat projects. So Gabi, we look forward to hearing about more of some of those projects. And you're currently on, there we go. Yep.
Yep. I was like, where did my button go? So. All right, so yes, hello. As Kristine said, my name is Gabi Bulwark, and I'm a graduate student, and I am a part of the Native Plant Initiative, which is its own little entity as a part of the Natural Resources Department here at SDSU. So today I will be talking about what the Native Plant Initiative is, what we do, and what we can do for you as the public. Okay, so our mission is to support the use of native plants in private and public lands in the Northern Great Plains through research, education, and outreach. So this graphic is about the Native Plant Material System. This was adapted from the Bureau of Land Management, and it has 8 components that are all reliant on one another. So if there is one of these components that is weaker than others, it makes the whole system weaker. So it's really important that we address the needs of all these components to have a safe, healthy native plant system. So I'm going to talk about the Native Plant Initiative through the lens of this native plant material system. So walking through each of these 8 focuses and where we kind of play a role. So first, we're going to talk about research, evaluation, and development, which I think is probably one of the biggest roles that we play in this system. Oh, and by the way, if I say NPI, that's just short for Native Plant Initiative, because that's just kind of a mouthful to keep saying. So the NPI, we have over 100 peer-reviewed publications. That QR code in the bottom of your screen there will take you to a database that has these publications, so you can go look at them. These publications are produced by Native Plant Initiative members, so that could be faculty, staff, students that are part of the Native Plant Initiative. So all the photos that you see on this slide are from graduate student projects that are related to native plants, and I'll talk about some of those throughout this presentation. Next, I will talk about the native seed collection aspect. So we, the NPI, have our own native seed plots. So we grow native plants to South Dakota, And once they're ready to be harvested, we have some workers that go out and harvest them, and we collect the seed to use for research, to sell, or to distribute as we see fit. We do have collaboration with some seed collectors all throughout the state who send us seed collections, which is awesome. And we also use some of this to develop propagation protocols and for conservation storage of these seeds. And then next we will talk about restoring native plant communities. So this one for the NPI is pretty tied in with the research aspect. So we have a lot of projects going on that are trying to figure out how we can better restore native plant communities. So as you can see in the bottom left there, those are some of the projects we're working on. So my personal project is looking at the effect of herbicide drift on restoration seeding. We've got somebody that is working with germination requirements and dormancy breaking of native seeds, so how we can better increase the success of germination. A previous graduate student worked on restoration in salt-impacted soils, and sort of an ongoing and kind of thread throughout everything is focusing on conversion and fragmentation of land to or from native grasslands. Next, we'll move on to the native seed and plant market. This is probably our most exciting and showy thing, because we do plant sales throughout the summer, and we also have an online order form that will be coming soon. So we have plant sales. The next one is coming up this weekend, actually, June 10th. It is in Salem Park in Spearfish, South Dakota. So we're excited to visit our West River friends. That is from 10 to 3. We also have one in Sioux Falls on June 17th and in Brookings on August 5th. So we grow these native plants ourselves. We start by seed in the greenhouse, and we grow them in the winter to spring so that they are ready for the summer to be planted by all of you. So we would love to see you at one of these plant sales. We also use our growing of the plants to develop protocols for greenhouse production of native plants. We will move on to professional and private landscaping now. We have kind of a superstar in this area in the Native Plant Initiative, and it's a grad student. Her name is Robin Butterbaugh, and her project is not a typical thesis. She's doing a design project. So she's making a portfolio of different landscape designs using native plants. So she has done this within the community of Brookings, which is really cool. So in the top photo and the bottom right photo, that is a bioretention basin that she designed with some other collaborators. And it features native plants that are good to be used in wetter areas, since this is an area intended for drainage. And you can also see in the bottom left, those two photos, Robin designed some new landscaping for the Agricultural Heritage Museum in Brookings. So Robin is really getting her name out there. I think there's probably a lot of people on here that know who she is, because she's very involved and loves to talk about natives in landscaping. Next, we'll talk about private grower production. So although we're not technically a private grower, right, because we're the university institution, we do use our experience to create seed production protocols and give advice to others, using our experience with our fields. So this could involve the establishment of, field plots. It could be maintenance of your plants, the harvesting of seed, cleaning of seed. So we try to, let people know what we're doing and talk together and see what's working, so to figure out with private growers. Next, we have field establishment and evaluation. So for this one, it's also tied to the research aspect pretty strongly. So we've got two main graduate student projects that are focusing on this. So one of those Her name is Grace. She is a graduate student that is focusing on monarchs' egg-laying preferences, different kinds of milkweed. So Grace had to establish this big plot full of all different kinds of milkweed. So she is sort of our expert on that plant specifically and how they grow. So that has to do with the field establishment aspect. And then also Brett Lang, who is a graduate student going for his PhD. His project is about planting native plants next to traditional agriculture, seeing if there's any soil health effects there, or looking into the possibility of an additional revenue source for traditional producers by harvesting and selling that native seed. So with these two projects, we're sort of working on the field establishment and evaluation aspect. And then we'll move on to our last one, conservation storage. So here we do have some opportunity for collaboration and growth. We do have 90 species currently, but we would like to have more species, more quantities of the seed that we have, more genetic diversity, seed from different places, and more current seed, because the more current the seed is, can be sort of correlated to the more viable that the seeds are. That is just a little snapshot of the NPI through the lens of the native plant material system. But I would also like to talk about this new exciting thing, a new regional seed strategy. So the NPI is working with a recently formed group called the Northern Great Plains Native Seed Partnership, and their goal is to write a Northern Great Plains native seed strategy. So there is a national seed strategy which fosters interagency collaboration to guide the development, availability, and use of seed needed for timely and effective restoration. So that's kind of a lot, but we want to do that for the Northern Great Plains specifically so that we can tailor these ideas to our regional needs instead of on a national scale. And now we'll talk about what the NPI can do for you. So one of the biggest things is we can provide native plants. So we would love to see you out at one of our plant sales or through an online order pickup. We are very excited. We always grow, let's see, we have, I think, over 30 different species this year, and it's super exciting. So we'd love to talk native plants with you and see you at one of those sales. We also provide educational opportunities through webinars like this. In the past, we have done webinars that focus on different research projects that are going on. And we also have a social media presence. We post 3 times a week on Facebook and Instagram. You can look up South Dakota State University Native Plant Initiative and you'll find us. In addition, we love to collaborate on different projects in the community. So recently we collaborated with the Dakota Prairie Elementary School in Brookings, and we're growing some plants for them because they are getting a beehive. So we went into some second grade classrooms and they got to plant their own seeds that will then be planted out by their beehive to create some habitat. So that's just an example of one project that we collaborated on. And then lastly, we are here for any questions you have about native plants and plantings or any advice that you may be looking for. So if you do have questions outside of right now, I would recommend that you email us versus message us on social media. So our email is down at the bottom there. It is sdsu.nrm.nativeplants@sdstate.edu. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much, and I can take any questions you might have.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabi. Will folks get the opportunity to meet you in person in Spearfish this weekend? Will you be there?
Yes, they sure will. And I'm leading a kids activity table. We're making seed balls. So very exciting.
Well, that ties nicely with my theme of getting children excited about gardening. So way to be on theme.
Yes, I totally did that on purpose.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the plant sale out in Spearfish, and I'll let folks know that I too am going to be out there. So if you're a Garden Hour listener, feel free to swing through Spearfish and say hello to Gabi and I. We'd love to see you. And if people have additional questions for Gabi, please continue dropping those in the chat. And if you've thought of any for Maddie, please fill that chat. It's way more fun to visit with them as our special guest than it is to listen to me drone on. And the good news, Gabi, is we do have a couple of questions lined up for you. So you talked about collaborations. So we have one listener who's interested in knowing, are you working or collaborating specifically with the Great Plains Native Plant Society? And I know they're housed West River, or their home base is West River.
Okay, not that I am aware of. We do not have any current collaboration. But that doesn't mean that we are not open to it.
All right. Sounds like a good thing that maybe needs to come together when we're all West River later this week.
Yeah, there you go.
So thank you for the suggestion on someone to reach out to our listener. So I thought this was a really good question. And Gabi, I'm interested to hear what you think. So we have a listener wondering, is it possible to talk about how native, so the term native, is being defined in the context of native plants? As in, is it plants adapted to the local environment, classified as non-invasive or non-noxious? Or is it more along the lines of plants that do well in the climate or soil type? And then I'll just add, Gabi, or what is the Native Plant Initiative definition? What's your litmus test for what plants we're going to grow, promote, sell, save seed from, etc.?
So I'm going to split that sort of into two questions. So for your question, how we decide what is native to South Dakota for what we're going to sell, we use the USDA plants database. And if it says it's native there, then we say, okay. But in reference to the definitions, it does get hard because plants do not like to fit into our nice little categories that we make for them all the time. But I would say, so we've got natives, native species, introduced species, and invasive species. So native, we consider their historical range, versus introduced is a species that was not present here originally, but got introduced, whether it could be somewhere within the country, it could be somewhere from Europe or Asia or anywhere else. But all introduced species are not invasive species. So invasive species are when they spread and become a problem. There are some introduced species that just hang out, don't cause issues, but they're not native. So I hope that helps kind of thinking about those three plant terms.
Mm-hmm. And Gabi, I'm curious if you have any comments on, to get to the listener's question too about soils and climate, something that would historically have been native to a prairie, for example. If I buy it at the plant sale and, it's a native plant and I get really excited to put that full sun, dry condition loving liatris, I want to put it in my boggy, swampy woodlands where it's nice and shady.
Right.
But it's native, it should do well there, right, Gabi?
So that's a good question, right? So although something could be native widespread across the whole state, that doesn't mean that on a smaller scale, something would be fit for that area. So yes, if you get plants from us at our plant sale, we do have signs stating what soil they like, what sun conditions, stuff like that. But that is, yeah, good question to point out.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad we're clarifying that, just because it's a native plant doesn't mean we can throw it in the prairie or throw it in the woodlands. We need to understand something about where that plant actually grows and thrives. And I'm glad to hear that you all are giving that advice too. Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Gabi. And again, if folks have questions that come up as I'm wrapping up our hour, which is quickly drawing to a close, don't be afraid to drop those in the Q&A. And as we're transitioning to my presentation, there was one lingering question about, are there any plants that actually do repel mosquitoes? And again, a fun one, I might have to pitch that one to Amanda Bachman and let her answer it at length for a future episode. But I too have worked in garden centers where there's the citronella geranium and, there's different maybe Some of, actually, to pick on some of our native plants or some of our plants in the mint family, are sometimes touted as repelling mosquitoes. There's not actually research that's supporting that. So right now, research isn't showing that any of those plants are truly repelling mosquitoes. So your best defense against mosquitoes is still going to be using insecticide insect repellents that are, age appropriate and labeled with the appropriate, percentages of chemicals and approved by the scientists. Yes, some of those plants do actually contain citronella and some of those compounds, but without us crushing and extracting those oils, the research just hasn't shown that that's doing a lot of good. So removing standing water, which currently is not a problem for me in Brookings, South Dakota, because the rain we got soaked right in. But being mindful of the length of your grass, removing standing water, paying attention to those low spots or those buckets that are catching water if we get rains, dumping all of that out is going to be more effective. Although go ahead, buy the citronella smelling geranium. They're really lovely and they're very pretty, but just buyer beware on that one. And I'll tip Amanda off that folks had questions about it, and maybe she can dive a little deeper. So rounding out the hour tonight, I just wanted to give you a few updates on what in the world we've been up to, and knowing that folks are settling into summer break. If you have kids home from school, I just wanted to give people a few inspirations for how to get kids out in the garden. Although I know on the 100-degree days, maybe get kids out in the garden in the morning and then take them to the pool in the afternoon. So just to know where I'm headed tonight. So just a few updates from the field and what in the world we've been up to. Rhoda Burrows came over and we worked with our student Hannah Boy, who you'll get the pleasure of hearing from in 2 weeks on June 20th. So if anything on this slide is something of interest to you, please come back in 2 weeks and you'll get to hear from Hannah, who is a master's student working on this project with us. But we had tarp soils using clear tarps for solarization, and using tarps that were black side up and tarps that were white side up to exclude all light. And we were doing this to look at how can we start to suppress or eliminate weeds without having to introduce as much tillage ahead of planting a very difficult to weed crop. So in this case, we picked onions. Now, originally, our plan had been to plant the onions in early to mid-May, which is an appropriate time to plant onions in South Dakota. But we wanted to place these tarps on our field 6, 4, and 2 weeks ahead of onion planting to see, if tarps sit on the soil for 6 weeks, what effect does that have on reducing weed numbers as compared to only tarping that soil for 2 weeks before planting? Well, as some of you may remember, we still had a bonkers amount of snow. So access to our fields, the ability to fill and prepare sandbags to hold down all those tarps so they didn't become sails, all of those things were delayed a few weeks, which meant that tarps went on a couple weeks later than planned, and we planted onions last week. They were watered in. We had an awesome rainfall the other night, so I'm very excited about that. And I think we're still going to be in good shape with our onions. We used 3 different varieties: Patterson, Candy, and Barolo. I always want to say Barlow. I'm going to stop trying to pronounce it. I'm doing a terrible job and embarrassing myself on live TV. Anyways, have a laugh at my expense. Moving on. So we're using these 3 onions. They are all, short to medium in terms of maturity for the onions. So I think we're going to be in good shape in terms of seasonality. So if you were someone who was still looking to throw some onions in the ground, I would do so sooner rather than later, but I would say don't be afraid to do so. I'm getting a lot of hesitancy from folks just in general of, is it too late to plant XYZ thing? I just put some more herbs in the ground the other day. Garden centers are starting to have their sales. So if something didn't make it for you in round 1 or you got hailed out, take advantage of the garden center sale. Don't be hesitant to start a transplant. If it's a leggy tomato, just bury that stem a little deeper so it roots along the stem and it'll bush out and do great. So don't take it personally if you need to replant something. There's still time. Back to those onions. So we're going to be evaluating how weedy these onions are and how they perform in these soils that have been tarped for different lengths of time. And we're also going to spend a lot of time looking at the soil health benefits of soil tarping, or some of the impacts of heating that soil up to really high temperatures. So we're partnering with Dr. Chris Graham, who is located out there in Sturgis, and going to actually be looking at the soil microbes. So stay tuned, more from Hannah on onions. Another project we have ongoing that actually kind of ties with Alexis Barnes' talk a few weeks ago about landscape fabric, but just wanted to show you, this is my 15 by 48 high tunnel at the Beersford farm, the Southeast farm down there in Beersford. And in the tunnel, we have landscape fabric, and we're going to vertically trellis specialty melons. And we ran a small version of that study last year. So if you want to read more about it, I've put the link on the slide. And this year, we're comparing those high tunnel melons to field grown melons, also in black landscape fabric, so that landscape fabric wasn't kind of a confounding factor. And what's neat about this is we just planted those field melons last Thursday, and we had planted those high tunnel melons 4 weeks prior. So one of the things I'm interested in is, the production cycle of, how much earlier we get those high tunnel melons, how they perform while trellis vertically, and what overall production of specialty melons as well as crop quality looks like, comparing fields to high tunnel. One thing I do want to note, and a good reminder if anyone is using black landscape fabric, pay attention to your water, pay attention to heat stress on these hot sunny days. We did have 3 melons not take well to transplanting, and we had to replant over the weekend due to a little bit of leaf scorch. And after I planted these, I have drip irrigation under that landscape fabric, but I still went ahead and hand watered every hole to settle that water around the root ball and make sure that there was plenty of water in that soil as we continue to drip irrigate. And you might be wondering what melon varieties we're growing. I'm growing Snow Leopard, which has a white skin with green spots and the flesh is white. We've got Honey Blonde, which is kind of a yellow yellow skin, and it's quite large, about the size of a cantaloupe. And then it's got an orange flesh. And then I've got Grizzlet and Sugar Cube, which I would consider what we call our traditional muskmelons or cantaloupes, depending on which name you use for them, that have those netted rinds and that really sweet, bright orange flesh that just smells absolutely delicious when you harvest it. So stay tuned later in the season for more photos of melons and what's going on out there. And just another fun update from the garden. I came home after a weekend of being with my nieces and nephews, and my tomatoes grew like a foot, I think. Right now, I think we can all watch our tomatoes grow. They're loving the heat, and as we keep things well watered and well nourished, they're doing really well. Now, you might be looking at these tomatoes going, whoa, those are super bushy. I did the same thing. So I want to share, I've been hesitant to share this yet because it's an ongoing experiment in my home garden, but one of the kind master gardeners in the state of South Dakota shared a little bit of seed of 4 different dwarf tomato varieties. And my understanding is that these 4 varieties were somewhat difficult to source. But the idea behind dwarf tomatoes is that they stay very small. We're talking 3 feet or less, and they stay very bushy, but they still yield really, really well. So I've got an article from the Illinois Extension Service that talks about dwarf tomatoes for space saving. And I'm actually, off the top of my head, not 100% sure on the source of these 4 seeds, but I look forward to doing some seed saving and again, reporting my results on yield for these. But I wanted to share that the University of Minnesota has actually released 2 different dwarf tomato varieties. So you might want to check those out from our neighbors to the north. I think they said each dwarf plant, again, stays very short in stature and yields at least 100 tomatoes per plant. This is in a small raised bed. I think it's 2 by 4 feet, and I've got 6 plants in that thing. So I'm definitely pushing my limits. Stay tuned and see if I regret it or see if they perform as advertised. All right, so to wrap up tonight, just wanted to inspire you. You might have kids or grandkids or neighbor kids that are home and wondering what to do and bored. So I just wanted to give you some gardening inspiration. And yes, all of these photos are of my lovely nieces and nephews. I'm really lucky that I've got a lot of nieces and nephews in my life who love plants and are eager to be outdoors. But I think a lot of credit goes to, you know, the grownups in their life. I'll exclude myself from that. We'll give the credit to their parents. But to the folks who have cultivated their interest in plants. Two of my nieces, so this is Greta here in the photo holding up the pressed plants, but two of my nieces both turned 9 within the last few weeks, and they both got a plant press for their birthday, and they have already been using it, as you can see. So, you know, even if it's a kid who maybe, you know, doesn't love going outside, but is into arts and crafts, consider something like a plant press or a leaf press where they could preserve those flowers and make bookmarks or make pictures or do leaf rubbings, things of that nature. Another way to get kids excited about plants and gardening, even if it's like way too hot and they want to hang out in the air conditioning, consider cultivating their interest in houseplants. And yes, pun intended, but houseplants are definitely having a moment. This is my nephew Micah's houseplant collection, and their cat Clive is also really into houseplants. So we gave Clive a basket to try to keep him away. What you can't maybe see is under those plants, he had covered the whole table with tinfoil to try to keep the cats from jumping on the table. I'm not a veterinarian. I don't know the science behind if tinfoil actually keeps cats away or not, but if Clive is a sample, it currently was not working for my nephew. But he, you know, has really enjoyed just propagating plants, figuring out where to put them in the light. So if you're space limited or you have a kid that really likes to stay indoors, see if they might have an interest in houseplants, especially something with a little danger factor like cacti. That really gets kids excited. And again, did not bother the cat. He totally rubbed his face on that cactus while I took that picture, or after I took that picture. Other things to think about, you know, those chores like watering or planting those big, easy to handle seeds like beans, you know, thinking about tasty things like cherry tomatoes where they can pop a few in their mouth as they're walking by in the garden. That can be really helpful. And if you're wondering, you know, are those flowers in my garden safe to eat? University of Minnesota has an awesome article on edible flowers, but my niece Amelia, who's in these two photos tending the garden, I got her really excited about eating nasturtium when she figured out the spur at the base of the nasturtium was full of the nectar and tasted really sweet. So she didn't like the peppery taste of the overall nasturtium flower, but the base of that plant was almost as sweet as honey and really, really fun. And Sam, who's pictured here planting the beans, he's also really enjoyed the activity of just filling those beds with compost and, you know, helping water as well. So you can also make it an exercise routine, if you will. And even the older kids can get involved. So these are my nephews, Micah and Gabriel. They were helping build the trellis. So think about, you know, maybe some of those construction or engineering skills. I do the same thing with my husband. He built all of my raised beds. Like uncle, like nephew. And then this is my niece Zaylee painted here. She too loves plants and loves being in the garden, but she's also really artistic. So think about, you know, could some of the young people in your life help paint some paving stones or paint some garden markers in this case? So I love these garden markers. They're old bricks. They are certainly not going to blow away or rot in the garden. And she, you know, took the opportunity to contribute to the garden that way. So think about ways that maybe you can make it a family activity. And if you're looking for more inspiration, this is a shameless plug, you know, look for folks like myself and Amanda and John and Rhoda. Look for us at extension events. We love visiting with kids. Amanda had awesome conversations at Garden Discovery Festival showing off her insect collection. I know she's going to be at various events across the state. And everyone, please save the date. September 9th at McCrory Gardens will be Insect Festival. So if you've got some young folks in your life who love insects, that would be a great place to be. And this was actually just yesterday at our High Tunnel Field Day. I went into it thinking I was going to teach all the grownups to graft tomatoes, and I had a couple of young people who were really interested in grafting tomatoes and actually did several 6-packs with me. So again, just know that we love seeing you and your kids at our events. So please keep bringing them. And finally, this was just a brief list of ideas. But I would encourage you to check out our Grow Getters website on the extension page. We had some curriculum that was developed during COVID and a lot of resources that were curated. And then we took that project, and over the last couple of years, we've expanded it into downloadable PDF curriculum. We have pre-K through kindergarten and 1st through 3rd grade. If you're a master gardener looking to lead an activity for children, this would be great for you to use. If you run a daycare, if you're a preschool teacher, if you're a school teacher, if you know any of these people, please share this with them. It includes, for our 1st through 3rd grade, it actually includes terms and vocabulary. We have suggested reading. We have step-by-step instructions on what materials you might need to source, or how to source, and how to set up different activities. And every lesson includes a science activity, a nutrition activity, and a physical activity. So again, whether it's a school setting or you're just looking for some things to keep your kids busy at home, those activities are here. Gabi referenced seed balls. We do have a seed ball activity in our Grow Getters curriculum. So be sure to check that out. And if you have any feedback on this curriculum or how you're using it or who you shared it with, myself and my colleague Anna Tevet, formerly Anna Barr, would love to hear from you. Just a quick thank you to everyone who came out to the Waldner Farm Field Day. Really appreciated it. A note that many of our Garden Hour hosts, we're going to be hitting the road this week and be doing Master Gardener training. This was me packing up my houseplants. So Garden Hour is going to look a little different next week, but again, same time, same place. We hope that you'll join us, and we're so glad you've been sticking with us all summer. And I realized that we are to the point where we need to bring the show to a close. And I just want to let everyone know that as questions come up throughout the week, know that you can always contact any of the 4 garden hotlines. And we're so excited to welcome Sarah to the Pierre Regional Center. So we've added a 4th hotline, email, phone number, and location. And Sarah just joined us in June, and she is accompanying our other garden hotline staff across the state who are very excited to help you with your gardening questions. And Gabi and Maddie, I just want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really, really appreciated hearing from both of you. And again, look for Dr. Madalyn Shires at events at McCrory Gardens and various field days. Look for Gabi at a plant sale near you. And everyone have a great evening, and we will see you next time on Garden Hour.